Welcome ladies and gentlemen, I am SocioPsycho of Mob Reviews, and today we are going to go over the top 10 of 2015. These are games that I enjoyed playing, as this is my personal opinion. If a game that you enjoyed is not on this list, it doesn't mean that the game is necessarily bad. Perhaps I just did not enjoy it the same level that you did, or I didn't even get around to playing it. So many games get released each year that it is a cascade of games. It is impossible to look at everything. So keep in mind that this is my opinion of my top 10, and let's get to it. Now we'll start off with number 10 as an honorable mention more than anything else. I'm sure if I did play the right game, I could have found a game to fill this slot. A game that I've enjoyed is Quest for Infamy. I highly enjoyed this game, but unfortunately it did come out in 2014, even though I didn't find it until 2015. It's a type of game which is a old Quest for Glory style experience, an adventure point and click with combat action integrated into it, and a story of infamy and humor. If this game came out in 2015, it definitely would have been one of the top 3 on my list, but unfortunately I missed it, thus giving it an honorable mention because it is that good of a game. It falls into a genre which we don't see and really thought was close to extinct, if not extinct, due to nobody really able to capturing the essence of it correctly. A point and click adventure with a usage of tools, whether you want to be a warrior, fighter, or thief, and an experience in an open world puzzle and maze-like element which rivals the classics. It is a game that is highly interactive with great storytelling and a world filled with mystery and wonder. It's not often we get to see games like this, and I'm really glad that the genre isn't dead, as I enjoyed greatly this game, and this is my number 10 honorable mention. Number 9, StarCraft 2 Legacy of the Void. Now I've always been a StarCraft fan, never overly compulsive, but I enjoy the original StarCraft 1 in '98, and I've been waiting until they came out with StarCraft 2. And when StarCraft 2 did come out, they had the first Wings of Liberty, then the Heart of the Swarm, and now finally the Legacy of the Void, and we split these up within different degrees. I'm happy to see the finalization of the story as well as a continuation of the mechanics that make a legendary brand keep being legendary. The throwback to a RTS element done right is something that I really enjoy. We don't see many RTS games, real-time strategies, yet alone ones with really strong stories. Now you may be thinking, why is this number 9 if it's that good? And while I personally enjoy the game of the RTS elements, I did not enjoy the story of Legacy of the Void to the same degree and emotional height that I did the first 2 chapters of StarCraft 2. I found the Wings of Liberty and Heart of the Swarm to be far more emotionally involving than StarCraft Legacy of the Void. But it doesn't negate all the content, the capability, and the love I have for the universe, the community, and everything else. And while I may not be one of those crazed StarCraft players, I definitely do appreciate a good game when it comes out. And mechanically, this game is sound and should be held up as an example for anybody else who ever wants to do or create a RTS game. Number 8, Morningstar Descent to Deadrock. Now this is an odd choice you may think, as it is a point-and-click adventure game in a 2D manner. And while it does have some issues with voice acting not being all that amazing, the fine crafted and well done situational puzzle and exploration that they have in this game, in order for you to get through one point to the next, completing your objectives, progressing the story forward, and continuing to push further and further into the game to understand everything that you need to do, upon which all makes logical sense. There is no silly, find a seashell and a car battery and make yourself a jet engine. Everything in the game makes good darn sense. It is a sci-fi theme which appreciates your time and leaves you feeling with a sense of completion and escape from the world. You have really accomplished what you set out to goal. The beginning may be a little rough, and thus why it's so far up on the list here, but the mechanics of how well the game is done, this should be a definite interest to anybody who is looking into or enjoys point-and-click adventures of this genre. It doesn't berate the player with the locations or items that you need in comparison to how they interact with the world all make relative sense, and it's really just about you fulfilling the role of the character, as the character isn't a space marine, you're not some far-gone warrior, you are an engineer, and restoring the atmosphere wraps around that precisely well to allow the player to feel like the character that they are expressing, to feel like they are an engineer without putting any of the burden of an educational school required to be an engineer. It does a fine line of skill, understanding, and area visualization of putting the clues together needed to progress forward and not berating the player for not being smart enough to do it. You are an engineer, and they tie it so well that at the end you feel like an engineer, and the very survival depends on you being a good engineer. Number 7, Tengami. Now Tengami is a interesting paper-folded little puzzle experience, and while it may not be the longest game, you're only looking about 2 hours, it is a very relaxing game. The main reason this game gets on the list is because it is hands down the top relaxing game that I've found for this year. I always like to have a game in the top 10 list that really signify a throwback to art and relaxation. Don't worry about not being too smart. Don't worry about not having the quickest reaction. Don't worry about not understanding the lore of whatever. Understand by visualization the minimalistic puzzles and the artistic beauty, along with a great soundtrack that really helps you just melt the problems of a world away. We don't see many games like that, and very or even fewer done right. While Tengami is a very simple game and a short one, it's definitely one not to overlook if you're just looking for something to relax to, kick back after a hard day's work, and put in some time. Number 6, Alien Robot Monsters. Now this is a unique, interesting little change now, isn't it? I always do enjoy tower defense games, but I haven't found myself enjoying a tower defense game this entire year until Alien Robot Monsters came along. It is originally a port, but it's done so in the understanding as they transferred it over to such a degree that they understand what it means to be a PC game and what it means to have collaboration in between the different towers that you build. Yes, there's always some little issues, and it's not perfect in some of the later end stages of a power creep of what towers you have available. Some become obsolete in comparison to others. And while this game is not perfect, it is damn well good, and it was highly enjoyable. As I said, I didn't find myself enjoying a tower defense game more or less throughout the entire year until this one came along. And anytime after I would play another tower defense game and it wasn't as good, I found myself saying, oh, I wish I was playing Alien Robot Monsters. It's an experience that has a minimalistic story, but that's okay because it goes back to more of what tower defense is, and it does require you to have some knowledge of tower defense, as it's not a beginner entry-level game. And as you may think that it may be unbalanced in difficulty due to it being a port, as I stated earlier, that's not the case. It has a high level of difficulty to advanced to expert, but it all makes sense in how you're able to acquire your progression throughout the game, how you spend your points and abilities to buy upgrades that may or may not be useful to you depending on what build you're going for, to divide how you spend your upgrades throughout the missions, as you won't be able to gather up everything, gives the player a sense of choice and power throughout the game. And it's actually pretty long. You're looking at 10 plus hours in the game, and you're looking to get your money's worth. For tower defense games of 2015, this is a hands down easy choice. Number 5, SOMA. Now, SOMA and I have some issues. We disagree on some areas, and we do, in fact, dislike some core mechanics that SOMA actually put forth. I don't enjoy how they did the stealth in comparison to the monsters. I don't like the antagonist or the male character that you play as I find him too much of a whiny little bitch. But what I did enjoy is the story that was very heavily rooted into the very essence of what it is to be alive, the philosophical debate upon what it means to be living. But beyond that, who also has the right to live versus who doesn't? I think the game did miss some marks here and there, and it could have been better overall. But for the base element of what the game is trying to go for, it does hit that notch. Of course, any game can be better, and any game can have or improve upon its abilities. But I found myself relatable more to a companion, the character, the female protagonist that accompanies you, rather than the main character yourself. And she did an excellent job of being a counterbalance to his little whininess. And so it never became overly grating or annoying in dealing with the different situations. The game respects your time, and it does so in a very beautiful scenery, an underwater experience, and a game that has a sort of atmosphere and attitude which you don't see very often. Mechanically, it may not be the best game of the year, but it has a story that really hits home, and at the end of the game, for the most part, you're left thinking, you know what? That wasn't too bad. Of course, I'm never truly satisfied and I would have changed some things, but as the game itself, the heavy talking points upon which it related, asking questions and leaving you with questions even to the end upon what does it truly mean and where's the moral disguise of who is right and who is wrong to live or die, always comes down to the individual on a personal level. Number 4, the Charnel House Trilogy. Now this one is also a rather short game, running around 2 hours of playtime, and while the price isn't too bad for that experience, the main reason why this point-and-click adventure is on the list of 2015 is simply because of the emotional weight of the story. I found myself wanting more even though the game was over at the end. I wanted to know what happened next, what was the conclusion of things that didn't really pertain to the main storyline. I wanted to know the lore, I wanted to know the backstory, I wanted to know the side stories, I wanted to know about the other characters, where everybody was, how everybody was doing. And that is because it sets itself up in a manner of storytelling that delivers a very heavy punch to you at the end of it. Perhaps you'll cry, perhaps you'll be freaked out, perhaps you will be surprised in delightful mannerisms upon where you just can't stop thinking about this game. It's a simplistic 2D point-and-click game, but the elements of puzzles within the game and finding the locations of items to correlate the items into the world all make sense. If you need to get a passcode for your computer and it's referenced as a book, you know that you need to find the right book on your bookshelf. Everything ties in very well, but it's truly the story and the interaction that the characters have with each other which help propel this atmosphere of suspense and wonder and intrigue more than anything else. I couldn't put the game down, and when it was finally finished, the explosion of music just got to me. Emotionally, this has to be one of the best games of 2015. Number 3, Tormentum Dark Sorrow. Now this is another game that I disagree with a little bit here and there, as there are some areas upon the logic of good and evil, the social versus moral calamities upon who is right and who is wrong, what is evil and what is good. While me and this game do disagree on certain areas, the game itself and how it progresses in a 2D point-and-click adventure element with a adult-themed aesthetic is done without equal throughout this year. I found not only the elements of the puzzles to be challenging enough, but the world itself to be very enticing into figuring out how to progress forward and what's going to go next. It's a clash of apocalyptic heavy metal, but it takes itself with just the right grain of seriousness, with allowing the player to make the choices that actually matter throughout the campaign to affect the world. The choices you make in the beginning add up and tally at the end. Everything does tie together. There are some issues within the exploration of the world, within how the narration is delivered, in allowing the player to have a more or less confusing time expressing how they understand the world. There's not really any lore, or it doesn't really fill the gaps, unfortunately, to the element, but the way that you interact with the world, using your devices, using the items you find, and getting through the puzzles is done in such a manner that it helps overlook some of the poorly done narration or lack of the story. And while the story does combine, and at the end of the game, everything fits together rather well, it's just that narrational drop where you don't really feel like the story is giving you the information and the hunger that you may seek for knowledge that you want. What's going on extra? What is the lore? What is the understanding of the different situations and characterizations of the different people in this world? Why are these people like they are? Who is good? Who is evil? What are the dynamics of this world? Not just what I personally think should and shouldn't do due to my own fabricated elements of a world. It's a dark themed game that makes you have to think on a moral hierarchy, but it does have some issues. But mechanically, aesthetic, it is very well done, and it's a game I highly enjoyed. Number 2, Hatred. Now for many of you this might be a surprise because Hatred is a very adult themed game. It is one of the darkest games in relative history of game making. Yes, there's always worse games. There's always going to be something that is going to be more grotesque or disgusting to look at. As you play in Hatred as a serial killer, more or less, that goes on a killing rampage, there really is no story tied in. You're not meant to really connect with the player, only enjoying the carnage of killing innocent people and those who are trying to stop you. Even though the story is rather lacking to a point of non-existent, and that can be hard to digest as there's no relatability to the player, the mechanics of the game, how you react to this top-down shooter, is done in a very nice way. There's a multitude of weapons and enemies and plenty of content for the player to enjoy. How you get through one time may be absolutely different than how you get through the next time. But in the end, it's really less about how grotesque the individual actions that the player is taking that may make you feel disgusted, and it's more about the smooth quality of the gameplay itself. The aesthetic is a morality of the individual. Do you find this palatable, disgusted, disgusting, or it should be completely annihilated from the face of the earth? This game has great, well-done mechanics. The way you interact with the world in your serial killer actions makes you feel like a bloodthirsty psychopath. Yes, you're not going to be killing in an artistic manner. You're not somebody who is, nor is it a type of game that is about an individual serial killer trying to make his mark on the world. It's about a guy who's been pushed too far and goes on a wild killing spree, and the mechanics welcome that. The element of the gameplay of a top-down shooter is one of the best of the year. Not only do you feel the action and reaction to the abilities that the character is able to accomplish, the reaction to the world and the interaction with the environment and the people in it and how you regain health is disturbingly, mechanically terrific. So while this one may be a darker themed game, one made for adults, mechanically it is beautiful. Number 1, Gravity Ghost. Now here is a game, the top game of the year. Gravity Ghost is a very interesting puzzle / platformer in a universal world with an underlying story narrated and told in little clips as you progress through a mission, sort of as rewards. It has a very beautiful art style, an excellent direction upon how you interact with the world, how you use different elements to get past different puzzles, and how you really just wrapped up into this environment. By the end of the game, the way you interact with the world and the way you really bond with this character that you play as, who is a female protagonist, you, by the end, do not feel like you are watching the game. At the end, you feel like you are part of the character, part of this family, part of the story. And it is no shame for me to admit that at the end of this game, I had a few tears. I'm not the type of guy to put my face in a pillow and just cry. That's not my style. And it's amazing if a game can actually get my eyes to water. But this one made me sit up, acknowledge the game, and say, "You, sir, you have done good." The emotional heart wrench and click that the game has at the end is the pinnacle expression of true beauty, of love and loss, of hate and fear. The game expresses itself in a manner that is truly amazing. And while the gameplay may not be for everybody, the storytelling in this game is phenomenal. I'm a very difficult critic for somebody to get their game past. I expect a high level of professionalism. I expect a high level of aptitude within the mechanics working along each other. To make it on the top 10 at the end of the year of my list may not mean much to you, but to me, it means that these games are exceptional, that they have done something right where all the other of hundreds of maybe even thousands of games that came out this year are incapable. And for Gravity Ghost to stand, in my eyes, atop so many, and as I said, I didn't play every single game that came out, that's just impossible. But out of what I experienced this year, for Gravity Ghost to be up there in my eyes as number 1 is the best way I can honor a game that I feel has done such an amazing job of telling a story and involving the player into the world. Not just making you feel like you're playing a game, but making you feel like you belong and everything that happens to the character happens to you as an individual. So ladies and gentlemen, this has been my list of the top 10. I hope they have been helpful to you. I have a few reviews on some of these, as you've no doubt seen. There will also be a link for those in the description below. They are more in depth. They fill in the gaps which I haven't here, as I do in-depth reviews. But I hope this list inspires you to look at some of these games, to even check out just the top 3 and see for yourself whether you agree or disagree. I have been SocioPsycho of Mob Reviews. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next time.
Out the patches that we've sown.